Mini episode 150 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.info.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello and welcome to our landmark 150th FDH Lounge mini episode. I'm FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris, and I'm happy to introduce our recognition of this era of our programming. Approximately a year ago, 4.5 years into our history, we moved from our previous full-length format to our mini episodes and, more consequentially, have stood on our own 2 feet for the first time in terms of our distribution. We've received invaluable technical assistance during this time from our friends at Sportsology, and more specifically good friend Russ Cohen, but we've been on our own in ways we never contemplated were possible. I'm very proud of all of our FDH Lounge dignitaries for stepping up, and beyond that, grateful that so many have returned to the fold in this past year. Special thanks to our senior producer Steve Servillo, the best guest booker in the business bar none, for the clips you're going to hear. We've arranged the top 15 guest clips from our mini episodes, the most crucial moments from the most crucial conversations. I'm hopeful that you will hear exactly why this program, where nothing is off topic, is such a great source of pride to all who are a part of it.
It's just a shame that the way that the laws were not constructed here in this state, it leads to a situation like that. They get on the loose, and authorities have to do what they have to do to protect the people. It was just terrible.
Well, it was a tragedy, just as you've said, and there's some interesting sidelights to this. Well, one thing, let us hope that the enormity of this tragedy will cause the states that do not have laws or do not have adequate laws about wild animals, that they do something about it. These collectors, as this man was, he had 56 animals. 49 of them were killed. The others ended up in zoos. The enormity of this brings the attention required to do something about it and prevent something like this. Now, they're lucky that someone or several people weren't killed, because with these wild animals running all over the area, it could have happened so easily. And 25 of our 50 states have no laws regarding collecting wild animals, or inadequate laws. And those 25 states have got to do something about it, or there are going to be more animals killed and more deaths of human beings. And Ohio is one of the 4 worst states in the entire country so far as animal law for wild animals, that is. Ohio, Oklahoma, and Missouri, and Nevada are the 4 bottom of the whole barrel. And let's hope that this will cause people to start demanding protection. And another thing that's interesting, this fellow, among his 56 animals, he had orangutans, he had cheetahs, and he had chimpanzees. Now, most collectors can't get their hands on them. Where did this guy get them? I know that Ed Stewart and Pat Derby of the Paws Sanctuary are going to go after it, and they're going to find out where he got them, and they're going to follow the paper trail right back to where he actually laid his hands on them. Did he buy them from a zoo? That zoo will be in trouble if he did. Did he get them from an illegal breeder? Let's hope they get him if they do, if he did. But it was just an appalling thing.
Myself and my mom were big fans of Sam Cooke also, and I understand that's something you got from your mom. And I understand that Sam Cooke was a great influence on your voice and how you went ahead with your career and how you approached singing.
So true. I remember being in my mother's Thunderbird, a little tiny Thunderbird that she owned, and we were driving around, and I just remember hearing this song coming off the dashboard, because back then radios had one speaker and they were in the center of the dash, and I just remember hearing this voice come across, and it was Sam Cooke, and he was singing Cupid, and the way he sang, "Draw back your bow," I just couldn't believe this guy. It just, tunnel vision kicked in on that speaker, and the whole world went away. And I was captivated in the echo, in his voice, in the music, in the track behind his voice, and the way the track sounded, and then the way the track felt, the rhythms of it, and the soul this man had in his voice just absolutely slayed me. And I was motivated, highly motivated at that point to find out, be it ever so tiny, what part of that I could ever feel or try to become.
Do you think anybody can stop Kentucky, Ernie?
I'll let you in on a little secret on my bracket, which, by the way, looks absolutely horrendous at this point. There is a very, I highlight my wins with yellow, and then I X them out with the Sharpie, and there's more Sharpie than highlighter at this point. But my Final Four was Kentucky, Louisville, FSU, and Kansas. And I've got Louisville playing Kansas for the title. So, yes, can Kentucky be beaten? Yes, by Louisville in the Final Four. So there you go. You've heard it here first. After Louisville beats Michigan State, which is going to be a real slugfest, and then Louisville and Marquette, and then it's Louisville over Kentucky. I can tell by the silence on the line that you are not buying into this, and you can actually see why there are so many X's on my bracket even as we speak. But that, Ernie, you know what? It's asking a lot. I think that the Kentucky team is so loaded, and even when you watch them play and they might fall behind by a little bit, I mean, they explode. I mean, for them, like a 7-8 nothing run over a minute 10 is nothing. I mean, these guys, they just are so athletic and so gifted. The only, it just comes down to that whole one and done nature of this tournament, though, is, one game if somebody gets in foul trouble, or if somebody rolls an ankle, or if somebody's just not shooting the ball well, or somebody makes a bonehead play, then maybe that's what turns it around. But certainly when you line up against that team, and Billy Donovan has said it. Billy Donovan's Florida team lost 6 out of 10 going into the tournament. 3 of those were to Kentucky, and he's like, look, they got 6 first-rounders on that team. What are you going to do? So I think it's going to take an upset for sure. But I do think it's possible. Whether it's Louisville, as I have, remains to be seen.
Ernie, for the matchup that you're forecasting, nearly that matchup alone in the national semifinals, Louisville and Kentucky, that would be an A-bomb going off in the Bluegrass State regardless of who wins. I can't even imagine what that would be like with those two teams playing for those stakes.
Oh, I know. It would, that would be, again, it's one of those things, too, when you see how the bracket's drawn and you say, let's see who could meet here in this round. Let's see who could meet. Look who might meet here in the Final Four. But again, it's that would have to take a 4 seed getting there in Louisville. But I like the way Pitino's guys played in the Big East tournament. I love the way they get after you. I love Peyton Siva's game. I think he's just a really intense, talented guy, and they just have a way to me of when Pitino prepares, and if he can keep the game close, then anything can happen.
For anybody that follows you on Twitter, for anybody that's seen you give little shout-outs on a Sports Center here and there, one of the big pro wrestling fans, certainly at the worldwide leader. So my first question for you, and looking at where you grew up and the time frame, were you fortunate enough, did you get a chance to catch any of that really sweet Bill Watts stuff back when Mid-South was really in its heyday? Were you getting that in Houston?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Houston wrestling was its own promotion for the longest time, especially for most of the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And then they got put into the Mid-South promotion in the early 80s. So I was exposed to Mid-South and NWA wrestling since I was a little kid. So I always preferred that to the WWF at the time, now WWE. So yeah, it was I thought that was some of the best wrestling going. I mean, we also had world-class championship wrestling out of Dallas. You could get that on cable. So I was fortunate enough that I got to watch a lot of good old-school wrestling growing up in Houston.
The decision to look at local, I'm just curious about this because you alluded to this, that again, as far as getting a chance to do some big things, and you really did, when you look at some of the bookends of recent history, being on the air on 9/11, being the gentleman who was anchoring the night of the bin Laden mission being announced. Does it make it easier in that sense, knowing that you've done some things? I mean, when they're cracking open the time capsules 100 years from now, those moments are going to be there. Does it make it a little bit easier knowing that you've done that already?
I'm very proud of the opportunities that I had at CBS. I mean, I had some, as you said, a couple of those are really bookends there, 9/11 and the capture of bin Laden. I'm really proud of those. All my career, all my professional career prior to going to the network, and even before that in college, I had this dream of being a network correspondent, and I'm one of those people that got to do that for a long time and got to cover some great stories. And
I'm not sure that really resonates with a lot of people, what could be at stake here. I mean, if you're going to an ATM the next morning and there's nothing there and there's nothing that's going to be there anytime soon, these are the things that people just don't really wrap their heads around enough. And yet, if enough of these dominoes fall, unfortunately, we could be looking at that.
Right. And I think that the Greek people have to realize that probably more so than anywhere else when they go to the polls this weekend, because they, of all people, are making a choice that is directly tied to that outcome. I mean, think about it. Right now in Spain, 1 in 4 people is unemployed. In the youth population, 1 in 2 people is unemployed. And when you talk about the type of disorder that can create, you know, not even contemplating what economics means, but just contemplating what life in the streets is like, walking down the street in a society where so many people don't have a job and don't have opportunity, that changes the dynamic, and it's not just an economics discussion anymore, it's a sociological discussion.
But what I was fascinated by in watching that was your recall on some of the things that happened from back in the 90s. I mean, you're somebody that has had concussion issues, the stroke, even those of us that have been fortunate enough not to have that happen, I feel like maybe couldn't recall these kinds of things. So I'm fascinated by the thought process on that, Brett. I mean, these are clearly things that you still remember about what happened then, but I guess would it be fair to say you remember, but it just doesn't have the capacity to wound you as it once did?
Well, I remember it all, but I've moved on past it. You know, you have to. You know, I always say this, but it's just the truth, is that when you've suffered a stroke like what I suffered in 2002, you learn over time that the things that you carry around and all the grief and when I suffered the stroke in 2002, I was still grieving pretty hard over my brother Owen's death, and Bulldog's death just happened a few weeks earlier, and there was a lot of dissension in the family, and there's a lot of strife and going on in my daily sort of routine, and it's the same thing with Sean. Sean bothered me for years, what happened with Sean, and I'll never forget what happened. I'll never forget how I feel. I wanted to express myself and tell everyone how I felt and what exactly happened, at least in my words. And I was able to write my book, and I was able to do that. And I remember I kind of wrote the book, and it was over, and it was done, and I made my point, and most people appreciated my point, and it was kind of like over, except for everyone just sort of had tagged me as a guy that was still not over what happened. And the more I thought about it, I said, the best thing I can do to move on is to really move on and to kill this thing and put it to rest and make a truce with Sean. And I tried for quite a long time to make some kind of connection with Sean where I could at least explore whether it would be worth trying to make any kind of a truce with him, and then through different channels we we eventually did get there, but I think it was good for him, it was good for WWE, it was good for me, and above all, it was good for wrestling fans. And I feel today in my everyday sort of routine, I feel a lot less strife, and I'm glad I went back. And anybody that sort of goes, oh, he sold out and he went back, or he didn't do the right thing, or he should never have gone back, they don't know what they're talking about. I did it for my own peace of mind, and that's the most important. That's all that matters.
The average person would probably expect that with the mega hits that you had at the time that there would be probably to this day and probably for generations to come a steady stream of mailbox money attached to that, lingering royalties and everything like that. Do you think is the average person basically clued into that? Is that basically an accurate representation of when you have songs that are that big, or is it something where that really it's not as glamorous as that, and the stream really does drop off after a period of time?
Sure, it does. I mean, the law of initial income is from sale of records, and so once people have your albums or CDs, whatever they have in their catalog, and all that stops because everybody has it. Certainly, radio play and those kinds of things generate royalties, but of course, as we all know, terrestrial radio is disappearing with the advent of all the digital technology and iPods and Pandora and that stuff, so all that stuff's compromised as well. There certainly will always be income from those sources, but it does dwindle, and with the new model, I think it affects everybody negatively.
In looking at the long stretch that you have behind you, the tremendous catalog from when you were lead singer of Yes, your highest profile work, when you look at the commercial success of the period of the 80s, specifically the 90125 album versus the progressive rock thing when you guys were really pioneers of that back in the 70s, do you have a chapter out of those two that cuts a little nearer and dearer to your heart, or do you kind of embrace it all equally?
I think it's very important to go through the 70s music and realize that we were one of the bands that, used the progression of music, rather than stick to the possible sort of hit record sort of situation. And I remember in the early 70s, we were always making music to perform on stage. I think that was what Yes was all about, performance. And then we'd make records. We were very lucky to sell records, and we never really had a big hit single until Roundabout, and then after that, the record companies sort of said, well, please make another Roundabout, or please make another hit record. And all I wanted to do was to create music that was good for stage and presentation on stage. So we jumped into that world of long-form pieces of music. And I think that's what sustained us through into the 80s. And then, of course, we were very lucky to have a big hit record in 84, and it was a different world, totally different world for us.
I'm curious for your thoughts on the presentation of the King gimmick, because I know that in some instances when guys who've gone there and they've had they've been business opponents, if you will, of Vince's previously, there's always thought about is Vince trying to pull a rib once he's got them working for him. Did you ever see any of that in the presentation of the character, from the very ornate purple robe and the crown to anything like that, or did you just see it as being a normal part of a royal gimmick?
No, I had the good fortunate opportunity to be the guy that chose that as I saw fit for it. And of course, being in that position, I wanted to present it as well as it could possibly be done, and I think I did a damn good job of it.
It's no exaggeration to say this is something that I've waited about 20 years to ask somebody who would have a good idea on this, and based on what you had said.
I'm terrified of what you're about to ask.
But you and I are contemporaries, actually, Bill. So you were growing up about the same time I was.
And where did you grow up?
The Midwest, Ohio, actually. I was actually fortunate enough to get to listen to WMMS back in the day, and did quite often. So
that was the Buzzard, right?
Yes. Legendary station here that broke Rush and Springsteen, and really the template, I think, for a lot of the other great rock stations
the
great rock
Midwest.
station, no doubt.
But,
no doubt.
Past the point in time when they were in their prime, 1991, I've always wondered this. When you guys switched in, I know you weren't there at the time, obviously, but when SoundScan came in with the implementation of it that year, and it was sort of the end of the wild, wild west as far as how these things get reported. That's the year, of course, Garth Brooks broke big. It's probably best known for the year that Nirvana really broke big. You had some of the 80s elements kind of falling away a little bit.
Yep.
And I'm just curious for your opinion on this. I've always wondered, is it a thing where it was merely reflecting the trends that were getting ready to pop, or do you think SoundScan was really something that should be considered part of the story at that time, that maybe that there were styles out there that were more popular than we knew, and it took this reporting system to bring it to the fore? I've just always wondered if it's a coincidence.
There's no question about that. I'm happy to speak to that. Unquestionably, it's the latter scenario. Unquestionably, SoundScan sort of pulled back the curtain and let people see what was actually happening in America when it came to musical purchases, as opposed to what the sort of cognoscenti, and Billboard was part of that, believed was happening in America. And so, I almost liken it to Galileo, right? Was a heretic because he said the Earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was literally that kind of a sea change. We all went to bed one night, and this is, now I'm repeating history, right? I was graduating high school in 1991 and had no inkling that any of this was happening, but it's literally as if the world, or at least the world that cared about the music business, went to bed one day believing that, hair metal ballads and rock and roll and basically that, and maybe some R&B and some pop, was pretty much what the sun rose and set to. And then the next day we all woke up and it turned out that it was country music and hip hop and the stuff that really was happening out there. And so you can get a sense. The music business has occasionally earned its reputation as one that doesn't necessarily embrace change. And I think that was a moment where, looking back, there were plenty of people who did want SoundScan to come into existence, but there were also plenty of people who wanted to protect the status quo as it was. And anyway, it couldn't have been more clear, though. The Billboard charts were, I think, dramatically underrepresenting country music, underrepresenting hip hop, and SoundScan set that all straight pretty quickly.
Those early fights that you had on pay-per-view, they went down in history, I think, as being very instrumental to the growth of UFC and what it would go on to become.
Well, no doubt. You hear a lot of people talk about it. Tito Ortiz being a great adversary for me. I think that the plans lined up. The media jumped on board, and Tito was a great opponent for me. He presented kind of the bad boy image, and I presented more of the purest MMA, coming back from the beginning over in Japan for a stint. And it was just a great setup, and I think the way that Tito handled it, and the way that I handled it, and obviously the way that the UFC presented it, it just boomed. And I think that if you look at it, I really truly believe that those matches between me and Tito Ortiz surely generated UFC to be where it's at today. And no question, it also built stars like Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, and many, many others.
Our senior producer, Steve Cervillo, wanted me to bring up about Good Time Girls. He said that was probably something that helped you land bosom buddies. So talk about what the path was to getting that first breakthrough.
Well, impressive research. When you start touching on stuff I don't remember, that's impressive.
We try.
I was with a theater company for a little more than 5 years, from 74 to 79, an incredible group, in which included actors who came through: Jeff Goldblum, Danny DeVito, Rhea Perlman, my buddy Michael O'Keefe. The artistic director of the company certainly had an eye for talent. Despite that, he brought me into the company, and I was really groomed and brought up, by older actors some of whom were rough, had rough sensibilities, and once I kind of made my mark as a 19, 20-year-old actor, they stopped treating me like a kid. They could be, some of the older actors what's wrong with me? You know, I mean, we weren't physically fighting, but this was a bunch of Italian Americans, Irish Catholic Americans, and a lot of strong personalities. So you know, I really learned at a very young age. I kind of had to fend for myself. In some instances, you know, they were folks who were either with you or against you. In '79, a lot of folks had gone off to Hollywood. O'Keefe, Danny DeVito went out to do Taxi, and Rhea Perlman followed him out there. Obviously, they'd been living together for a number of years. I used to watch their apartment in New York when Danny went out in the mid-'70s to do Cuckoo's Nest, for example, with a couple other actors from the Colonnades, Vinny Schiavelli, and a couple other guys, Vinny, who passed away not long ago. So I had a snobbish attitude, Rick, and I said, I'm not going out to Hollywood. I'm not selling out. I'm going to be part of the theater community here and make my way. And you know, if Hollywood wants me, they can fly me out. That was my arrogant 24-year-old attitude. And you know, in the spring of '79, I tested for a pilot for NBC, Paramount NBC, and indeed, I didn't get the part out of New York. But I was flown from New York to Los Angeles and continued to audition and test for the role, and I got it. So there I was, flown out and embarrassed by my arrogance, but suddenly sitting in, you know, sleeping on DeVito's couch and then other couches, as we do when we're young actors sometimes. And I began. I was replaced in this pilot. The pilot sold for a series. It was called The Further Adventures of Wally Brown. Talk to Steve Cervello. He'll probably know better than I. Mm-hmm. And I was the only job I've ever been fired from because my agent was told we didn't want him to be the funny one. He's supposed to be the straight guy. But nobody told me that. And then I was rehired to play my role when they couldn't successfully replace me. And then the pilot disappeared. It didn't. The series commitment did not hold. And I was ready to turn around and head out, head back to Brooklyn. I was living with a woman in Brooklyn and was happy to come back to my haunts, but I got a guest starring role with Donna Pescow and dear friend Bob Hayes on their show Angie, and then the producers of that show asked me to join the cast of this thing that Steve brought up, the Good Time Girls, and I filmed 12 episodes of the Good Time Girls, made a very close friendship with my friend Adrian Zemed. We're still very close. She's 32 years later. 33, oh my, 33 years later. I remember when I thought 33 was you know, a grown-up, and now I have clothing that's 33 years old.
Your early days in Southwest Championship Wrestling and getting a chance to learn the business under the watchful eye of your dad and some of the great talent that was down there at the time, the likes of Gino Hernandez, and you know, growing into the business with him and some of the other guys. How did that really affect you for the rest of your career, getting your formative experiences there?
Well, you got to learn what is good, what is great. There were a lot of good guys back in those days, but they didn't sell tickets. There were a few guys that sold tickets in certain areas, and there were some guys that sold tickets every place they ever went. And those are the guys that you wanted to learn from. And I was very, very fortunate, and I've told this not very, very many times, but I refereed for 3 years when I was in college, and I refereed during the summer as my summer job. And refereeing, I got to be in the ring 5 times a night instead of one. And I got to watch the first match to the main event match. I got to watch the prelims up to the money matches. I got to be involved with angles and things that were going on and timing and everything, and watching just unbelievable talented people, Wahoo McDaniels, Jose Lothario, and people like that, Neil Mascaris, that were just outstanding. And I learned a lot from that. And then when I started wrestling, I went to Georgia for a little bit. Then when I graduated from college, I went to Florida for 4 or 5 months, and then I went to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling at the end of
1977 and stayed there for about 6 or 8 months. And I came back home. I learned everything you could learn about being a prelim guy. And then it was time for me to learn how to be a main event guy and sell tickets. And I did that when I came home, when I brought some of the different things that we were going to adjust, doing our TV show and doing some things here that I'd learned from the Eddie Grahams and I learned from the Crockett's. And then you go into my Southwest years. I mean, I wrestled Wahoo just about every day for a year or two. I wrestled Bob Sweetan, who was a great performer. I wrestled Buddy Roberts, who was Dale Valentine. But the key was he had John Valentine sitting in the corner every night for a year critiquing me. And we'd go back in the dressing room and John would critique everything you do. And there's nobody that could perform any better than Johnny Valentine in the history of wrestling. And to be a heel of that caliber, and when you've got that kind of tutelage going on, you've got to be a stark raving idiot not to learn something.
We have had a number of authors on the program who've really had to kind of scrape down and made the decision to tell some personal things here. So I guess for a story like yours, my sense is that it's all or nothing. It's hard to kind of hold back really too much. But what kind of a thought process was it for you when you made the decision? Again, I think you pretty much have to go all in to tell a story like this. But did you really struggle with too many of the elements in doing that with the honesty?
Oh my goodness, Rick! I really had to do some. I had to do some soul searching, some gut checking, the whole 9 yards. But prior to me actually writing the book, because anyone who knows me, I'm a very private man. I'm a very private person. I keep everything in check and in house. And for me to do a project of this magnitude, to expose my life, not only my life but my family's life, the way I did in this book. It was totally out of my character and out of my comfort zone. So I really had to convince myself that this was the right thing to do. And honestly, it really was, because it was a bunch of things rolled up into one that I'm getting out of this book. Number one is therapy. I had things built up and locked tight in my mind and heart for over 30 years that I refused to think about as far as my past, my upbringing. It was a very difficult time for me and my family. And it was some horrific things that occurred. And there's just some things that I refuse to even think about or talk about. So for me to get to the point to write this book, it had to have some really depth, some meaning to move forward with this thing. It has to have some substance. This project has to help somebody out there. That's the only reason why I decided to do it. There's going to be some people out there that reads this book, and they're going to be in similar circumstances, and they're going to be at the same crossroads that I was in all those years ago. And because of what I did, whether I did or didn't do, hopefully it'll help them, and hopefully it inspire them, because I had no business playing in the National Football League, let alone, I mean, literally, I really had no business playing, but it's amazing the heart and determination will do, and the circumstances will do to get you to do things that what everyone else said that you can't do. So again, it's an unbelievable story, a task and tale, and I pray that everybody gets an opportunity to go to www.vernonturner.com and get the next level of game I had to play.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the periodic table of elements.